Welcome. My coffee, my water, and my lemonade. What do you expect? There's nothing special about the cast of K-9. This is episode 524 of an Unearthly podcast, streaming live on September 14th, 2024, and featuring K-9, the Lost Library of Ukko, written by Deborah Parsons and starring Robert Maloney as Alistair Griffin, Keegan Joyce as Starkey, Philippa Coulthard as Georgie Turner, Daniel Weber as Darius Pike, and John Leeson as the voice of K-9. I am Bill Sylvia, the one in black, and I was planning to do real life stuff before the podcast until apparently Toby Fox decided to drop a newsletter. With me is acting technical director Alex Fireheart.
Hey there.
Aaron Romeo Moon Burke will most likely not be with us in person, by person meaning via voice chat. But we do have her thoughts on this week's episode, so she is with us in spirit.
Hmm.
So how are you doing?
Not too bad. I mean, thankfully, I got decent amount of extra hours at work in the week just
Nice.
gone. Um, I had to get myself to work on Monday, so and given that cost like fucking $28 or something, when they were like, "Hey, can you stick around until like 5?" I'm like, well, my dad will be home from work by then, so I won't have to get a taxi home. So, yeah, I'll stay until 5. So I ended up working 7 hours instead of 4. And then on Thursday or Friday, I think it was, hmm. Yeah, Friday, I worked 6 hours instead of 4. So, like 5 hours extra in a week. That's pretty nice. I was asked to work today, but I was just so out of it that I was like, no, I think I need the day off.
I feel that. I feel that.
Like, I kind of like working those 3 days in a row where one of them I worked until 5 p.m. I'm just like, you know what? I kind of need a day. Like the money that I turned down was double pay, but it's just like I need the money, but I also need rest. um so yeah. Um yeah, that aside, um basically just been playing video games and such. Like Splatoon 3 has what might be the last kind of like unique event thing going on at the moment. Which I think, as people pointed out, kind of goes with the fact that they were going to be updating it for at least 2 years and then stop uh, adding new stuff. So that would track. It doesn't feel like it's been 2 years, but um, I think I only realized that when I looked it up, and it's like, holy shit, really? Um, Although it's funny because I suspect the only reason that might be the case, that they're still only supporting in terms of new stuff. Like they'll still do like patches and stuff, but like going out of their way to chuck a ton of new stuff in it is stopped, possibly. Now is because the team that makes the Splatoon games also do the Animal Crossing games, which is why you had like two Splatoon games and then Animal Crossing and then another Splatoon game.
Ah,
Because they probably decided we're not going to bother with like a Wii U one, so then they were just working on the Switch one, so that's why it would have been.
which is interesting because you typically wouldn't have people working on. I'm not sure what you call the genre of game that is Animal Crossing. Like I know
Mm,
it's more than just Animal Crossing. There is a genre there, but
right.
I don't know what you would call it.
Mm,
But it's very different from the shooter genre.
yeah. I mean, the funny thing is they obviously, by virtue of the fact that Splatoon has only existed for, well, I say only, like next year in May it turns 10, which is still kind of baffling to me. Um, Although it shows you that they're not trying to crank those games out annually. The fact that it's been almost 10 years and there's only 3 games.
Mhm.
Um, but like Animal Crossing has existed since the GameCube or the N64, one of the two. So it says something that that I guess it would like. I think it's mainly just that team because like the people who came up with the idea were involved in that team, so they just kind of
So I had to look this up because I
mm,
had never heard of it until recently.
mm,
If you live in Japan, N64. If you
ah
live in and if you live in North America, it's GameCube, and I would guess that most English-speaking countries and other
mm,
non-Japanese speaking countries would be GameCube as well.
yeah, and then it was mostly outside of like a Wii game, it was mostly handheld after that until the Switch.
Which is also
Um,
handheld.
well, you know what I mean. Like it's kind of the hybrid that the which like
Hmm.
I'll be very shocked if they ever go back to separate handheld and home
Yeah,
consoles again.
but I will maybe because the first Switch game I cared about was Pokemon. I will
Hmm.
always consider the Switch a handheld console.
I mean, it's one of those
Also
ones
because it
where
didn't, I was able to play it when I didn't own a TV and bring it when I traveled. So,
yeah. I mean, I feel like it's the first console they've made where you can call it a handheld or a home console, and you're technically right either way. So,
mhm. And okay, come on, Twitch is freezing things up on me. So let me close that. So I have not had a fun week. So
hmm,
on Monday I was wearing different clothing, different pants than normal.
hmm,
And I could talk about that off stream if necessary, but that's all I'll say here. But basically that meant I didn't have as many belt loops as normal, so instead of wearing my keys on a carabiner, I kept them in my pocket.
ah,
And at some point, either A, when I was leaving my office, B, on the bus, or C, after I got home and started, taking off my shoes and emptying my pockets, at some point I either dropped or misplaced my office keys.
oh,
So I have not had access to my office all week, and I've been spending effort in things like, well, one, trying to get the keys back or find them or whatever I could do.
hmm,
Two, make up for the fact that I can't work in my office, which, that's a considerable part of stuff I need to get done.
hmm,
And then I think just the frustration and the energy from that kind of spilled over into other things, because then I was just like, for example, for the first time probably in my life, or definitely in my adult life, I was waiting for the bus, got up to throw something out, left my phone at the bus stop, got on the bus, and had to get out at the next stop and walk back and see if my phone was there.
hmm,
So it has just been that kind of week for me. Hopefully, it's over. It's a new week next time I have to go outside.
yeah,
So I'm hoping that is all just done and over with.
hmm,
All right. Uh, On tonight's show, we have some birthdays, not a full 10 count. We have Big Finish news and some sci-fi fantasy news. And then we go straight to our episode review, final thoughts, and ratings. So moving on to the birthdays. On September 8th, we have the birthday of Luis Minchin, who played the newsreader for Torchwood Children of Earth. So that is a full season of television, so it counts. She turned 56. The next day, on the 9th of September, we had 3 birthdays. Um, I'm sure this is not the correct pronunciation. Julia Sawala. It may be pronounced Sawalia, but I'm not entirely sure. She played the companion Emma in The Curse of Fatal Death. She turned 56 on the 9th. Also from The Curse of Fatal Death, Hugh Grant, who played the 12th Doctor, turned 64 on the 9th. And Janet Fielding, who played Tegan Jovanka from 1981 to 1984, and in 2022, plus Big Finish and various other media, turned 71. And then our final birthday on the 13th of September, Friday the 13th, Max J. Rosenberg, who's the producer for the Peter Cushing Aru Doctor Who movies, would have been 110, but died in 2004 at 89. So happy birthday, Luis, Julia, Hugh, Janet, and Max. From there, we jump all the way to Big Finish news. We had no new.
Doing the
Oh,
Lost Story.
that's a non-Doctor Who one, so it's after Doctor Who news.
Ah.
Yep. Yeah, we had no other Doctor Who news, not even filming updates that I could see. So for Big Finish, we have on the 11th was released New Adventures of Bernie Summerfield Volume 8, The Eternity Club 1. This was written by James Goss and starring, of course, Lisa Bowerman as Bernie Summerfield. I don't see any specific Doctor references on this cover.
I mean, the main one I
Sometimes the
see
7th or 8th
is
Doctor shows up.
yeah, like the main one. At least the main reference to like main Doctor Who that I see is just that the woman on the right is clearly supposed to be a what were they called? From the from Galaxy 4.
Oh, the guy the oh no, they weren't gynoids, they were clones, right?
Yeah. God, I forget what that race is called now.
I searched Galaxy 4 and I get Samsung Watch ads. Nomaga, it looks like.
Yeah, that'd be it.
Oh, she's clearly a MAGA. Yeah, that already is not aging well. Moving on. Released today, the 14th, was the Stuff of Legend studio version. So this was the recent live show they've been advertising. And that was written by Robert Valentine and starring Paul McGann as the Doctor and India Fisher as Charlotte Pollard. And probably featuring Nick Briggs as these Daleks I see on the cover. And then yes, from there we move past Big Finish. We haven't been doing much in the other sci-fi and fantasy news section very much lately, but this one definitely, especially on a slow news day, we had to talk about it. So James Earl Jones, best known as the voice of Darth Vader and Mufasa, and I think CNN, has died at the age of 93. Cause of death has not yet been revealed, which may indicate death due to aging. Jones started his acting career on Broadway in 1958 at the theater that is now known as the James Earl Jones Theater, with his film debut being in 1964's Dr. Strangelove. Two of Jones's more memorable works were Darth Vader in 1978's Star Wars, a franchise that he would act in 3 more times on the big screen. I'm pretty sure he did other appearances as well. And he has also authorized them to recreate his voice both for recent works such as Obi-Wan Kenobi and for potential future projects. And King Jaffe Joffer in 1988's Coming to America, whose 2021 sequel was his final performance. Jones was nominated for and received many awards and holds the prize combination of Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony, also known as an EGOT. James Earl Jones is survived by his son, Flynn Earl Jones. And that is all of our news.
You gotta say, making it to 93, that is a good run.
Yeah.
Like, especially considering some of the actors that he would have been around the same age as that he would have likely outlived.
True. Yeah, like we were talking about before we started streaming, you don't think of James Earl Jones as being from the black and white era, but yeah, he was in Doctor Strangelove. He was probably in other black and white movies, uh, and then yeah, most it seems like many of his more memorable works are, uh, over 30 years old at this point. So
Hmm.
it was long coming, but still unfortunate. And that brings us to the summary.
Yep.
So,
Let's see.
let me know when you're ready for a countdown.
Oops. Yep.
All right, 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, we open on Starkey and Darius trying to infiltrate a department building, possibly their HQ, during an open day, managing to get into Thorne's office, only for Starkey to get sucked into a screen he looks at. Darius manages to get it back to the professor, and K-9 reveals it's a library card from the planet Ukko, and that the Ukkans, a race of only women, are librarians who archive endangered planets in holographic form. And these data cards, with Starkey trapped in an archived version of a planet called Erlich, and that the and that only an Ukkan could get Starkey out. At varying points, we also cut back to Thorne and June having arguments over Thorne messing with alien tech for seemingly his own purposes, but also for the sake of the department. Eventually name dropping someone named Lomax, who will apparently fire Thorne if he doesn't get the card back within 12 hours. Meanwhile, an Ukkan librarian shows up at the manor and says she can help so long as they can get the plinth back. Thorne calls wanting the card back, and they agree to a trade of sorts so long as they can get Starkey out, resulting in a double cross where Georgie and Darius trap Thorne in the card along with Starkey. And it turns out Thorne brought a brick instead of the plinth. June goes and retrieves the plinth so the librarian can start the process of trying to get both Starkey and Thorne out. Managing it with seconds to spare before the time limit expired, and they'd have otherwise been stuck in there permanently. The Ukkan librarian threatens to effectively kill Thorne if he doesn't leave the professor and the kids alone, possibly June as well, before leaving with the card and plinth. And we end on Starkey asking K-9 if he missed Starkey, only for K-9 to give a typical K-9 answer before shutting down for the night so Starkey can get some sleep, with Starkey quipping that he missed K-9. The end.
All right, so we have 2 minutes and a bit under 11 seconds.
It's one of those things where even if it feels like a lot happens in these, you can still knock them out pretty quick.
Yeah, it's still a 20-minute episode. Also,
Yeah.
I like how you mentioned Galaxy 4, and then we get to all female species again. Speaking of which, did you include the librarian offering to take the professor home with her?
I did leave that out of the summary.
All right. Yeah, so I guess so now we move on to our review. I'm gonna read out Erin's thoughts, and I have not looked at these because we didn't know if she was going to be able to make it tonight.
Mm.
And then yeah, then we'll go on to Alex and then me. All right. So what Erin liked about the episode? She said classic filmed in a quarry episode. The librarian's design is unique. K-9 outsmarts Thorn. This seems to be a list of things she liked rather
Yeah.
than a single
I think it
thing.
was more like pick one kind of a thing.
So yeah, I guess this is just all of her notes. And I mean, it's not like we're short for time. So unless she takes everything,
Mm.
she also wrote they bothered to change the color of the disruptor goggles to show they had been deactivated. I didn't realize that, but that's a
Mm.
really nice touch for this show if they did,
Mm. I mean,
especially since.
they were using shutter shades, so it would have been an easy thing to just be like, let's just grab
Mhm.
some in a different color.
Right, right. Okay, what did you like about this story?
um, honestly, the fact that I found this quite funny, which, given the age range this is aimed at, and some of the stuff that's made me groan because it's leaning way too hard usually into being that, or like it's just the writing is just
I
kind
put
of
out
ugh.
good stuff made for that age range
Mm,
is often funny.
yeah.
So,
But I guess
so
like
just being
from
made
what
for kids
yeah
is
yeah
not an
yeah.
excuse for unfunny
Well, right.
material.
Well, again, my point is like when stuff leans too hard into thinking, well, this is for kids, so we should do this kind of humor. It's like usually that's like, it's like Sarah Jane Adventures at its worst is usually like leaning way too much into being for little kids.
Mm.
Um whereas at its best that was like classic Doctor Who. This is like, while there were some things like near the start that kind of bugged me, the further along it went, there were more things that made me genuinely laugh. So I was like, oh wow, I did not expect that from this show. Given like, I mean, there's probably been times previously where I've gotten like a consistent amount of genuine laughs that were like they wanted me to laugh, as opposed to just like, wow, that was terrible kind of laugh,
Mm.
or whatever. So yeah, it was like it was nice, um to have something like that where it's like I was getting a lot of genuine laughs.
Okay, so I think that's related to what I want to say is that I liked the dialogue in this episode. I felt
Mm.
like straight off the bat, like K-9 seemed like he had been written as the doctor. Um, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, I mean, like he
Right.
takes control of the situation. He's bantering with the villains and so
Mm.
forth. And like Starkey felt like he was written like if you took out Starkey and you put in like Ace or Rose or
Mm.
an actual Doctor Who companion, Sarah Jane, any of those would have fit with the dialogue that he was given. And that is
Mm.
really rare for this show. Like it really felt
Yeah.
like they went out of their way to have some snappy dialogue.
Yeah, like
Um,
my other choice was definitely going to just be like Starkey in general in this,
mhm.
because like a lot of the laughs come from dialogue they gave to him of just being like quipping at Thorn every chance he gets,
Right.
basically.
It really almost comes off like because I don't remember the opening episode well enough to remember details other
Mm.
than that Thorn was involved in some way. And it almost feels like Starkey has been like, I have been without my nemesis so long, and now he's back, and I
Yeah.
have new life.
Mm.
I don't think like I don't remember liking the dialogue in the first few episodes so
Mm.
much. But then again, like we were just getting our bearings, and our
Right.
best comparison was Sarah Jane Adventures at the time.
Mm.
I'm trying to see. So the person who wrote this wrote Sirens of Ceres and Ouroboros. Let's see. Ouroboros we rated fairly well, above a 4, and Sirens of Ceres we rated 3.17, so average-ish.
No. Like I remember, I'm pretty sure Sirens of Ceres was the one with like the Georgia going to school. kind of thing.
Yeah, which was probably the most cast members of any K-9 episode.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to what we disliked about the episode. And let's read off what Erin wrote. She wrote, Darius and Starkey didn't think there'd be video surveillance on Thorne's office.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm not sure if they cared. Fortunately, Starkey had water. What a coincidence. A librarian just happens to show up on the doorstep. Thorne acts like he can just warehouse prisoners inside library cards without food and water. So is Starkey in danger of dying from thirst? Where are the other three scientists who've gone missing? Is it just like AM in that the PC keeps them alive mysteriously, but they still suffer thirst and hunger? I'm not sure what AM is referring to here.
Mm.
Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so yeah, the librarian just happening to show up was definitely a big head scratching moment.
I
I've
will.
kind of like justified it to myself that like, oh, the department has some sort of shielding,
Yeah.
and then when they took it outside of the department, it kind of pinged whatever sensors
Yeah.
were on it.
Yeah. That's basically like while they never say it, that's basically what I headcanoned as well. Is
Mhm.
that like, oh, it's outside of a department building now, so they can finally trace it.
Yeah, it would have been nice for them to
Um.
actually say that,
Yeah.
but I think that can be inferred.
Mm.
And yeah,
Um.
the putting prisoners without food and water, and it's kind of tied into Starkey having water.
Mm.
It's yeah. Are they digitized to the extent that even though they'll suffer without food, it'll keep them
Mm.
alive forever? Or is it just like, oh, those scientists have died and Starkey would have been at risk of dying, but he isn't because they're going to get him out?
Yeah. I think the
In which case, if the latter is true, then Thorne is basically saying, well, here's a quick way to, let our prisoners die of hunger and then
yeah.
dispose of their bodies.
I mean, Darius does flat out say that he's dying of thirst, and like the librarian is more focused on like him
Better
contaminating.
not pee there.
Yeah. And it's like, to me that came off as like, well, yeah, he could die from being in there um with no food and water. It's just a matter of like, so it could be that, it could just be that the scientists like buggered off and died off screen somewhere rather than staying in the same spot. I don't know. And also,
Mhm.
I guess the thing is, we don't know if that's the only like the only card they had. I'm assuming it probably
Right.
was, but which might be
Yeah.
why they were so protective of it. But yeah. But as far as mine goes, I was almost going to go if she hadn't taken it the sort of like how they don't realize that they're getting into this building way too easy when Thorne knows them right there. But instead, I'm going to go for the fact that this feels like this episode had sections cut out to bring it down to uh 20 to 25 minutes. Like there feels like they filmed this in a way. This feels like it was maybe filmed to be a two-parter, which in some cases would just be some of the scenes in this would have been longer,
Mhm.
rather than like there being like overly whatever. Because just like there's some things, like there's the whole, you know, uh the librarian
The
being like,
librarian.
yeah,
Yep.
wanting to be like, hey, do you want to come back to our planet? When the last scene where they interacted, they were like fighting. So I'm like, well, there's clearly something missing there.
Oh, okay. I was thinking more like, yeah, maybe there was a scene that established the librarian and that she was coming to Earth or had
mm,
arrived on Earth.
mm. um but yeah, like there's just it feels like, and because like it doesn't feel like it was written to just hit the points it needed to and then go. This felt like a lot of extra stuff was just
Mhm.
cut, and that it like, you know, like I feel like this is a story, especially with the fact that you've got the 2 hour window, that you could have made this a two-parter if you wanted to like flesh out the librarian lady a bit more, and like the sort of actually have a bit of a relationship kind of start to form between, like, rapport between her and the professor, to be like, okay, now I can see why he might consider it. He's obviously not going to, because then the show would be a bit awkward. But, you know, but like, you know,
I mean, my interpretation was that he wasn't really considering it
mm,
because it's like, he can barely step out of his house.
right.
How's he going to go to a whole alien planet and keep his cool?
Mm,
That he was just like trying to be nice to her.
yeah. I mean, like, I feel like given his usual MO, he would have just been like, thanks, but no thanks, rather than trying to be like, oh, it's tempting, but no. Like,
Mm,
I think he would have, like, for him to even admit that there's tempting and he doesn't tend to lie, I could see that being a thing of, oh, I'm legitimately tempted, but,
got
um,
you.
so that feels like there's something missing there, where, like, over the course of this story, they were supposed to, like, build up enough of a rapport that he's like, oh, this is like a woman that I could fancy dating potentially. Which there's a lot to explore with that because of his whole, like, and to be honest, I completely forgot this was an element of it. That the whole reason he's fucking around with this fucking thing is that he's trying to get his family back. So there's stuff to explore there with, like, him potentially forming a relationship like that with this random alien
Right.
woman, and being like, and you could even maybe have it be that's why, that he's like, oh, actually, this is moving a bit too quickly.
Hmm.
I've
That
I'm
that would
still
be
getting
super
over.
interesting because that would mean one option for the end of the show. And I don't know if this was a show that like was canceled or if it met like a natural conclusion or which
Mm,
which is true. But that would mean that there one option for the show, assuming it doesn't end with the ending of him finding his family, which I imagine it probably will. But another option would be okay. I've accepted that my family is gone,
mm,
wherever they are. They've lived an entire life without me, and I'm
mm.
going to move on. And the way that I'm going to move on is to shack up with this alien lady.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I would say there aren't too many of these that feel like they should have been a two-parter, but this is definitely one of them. So yeah, it's mainly my point just being that this feels like there was a lot left on the
Hmm.
cutting room floor.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. And that could even partially apply to my what I wanted to say, and that is it. It at least at the moment is an acting issue, but it's hard to point blame at one single person. It's just kind of the confluence of things, and that is the way Starkey is acted and has always been acted
Mm.
does not fit well with the dialogue that he's given. Like he's
Yeah.
given better the dialogue than ever before,
Yeah.
but it doesn't feel like he's confident saying it. It's like
Mm.
they wrote him. They're like, oh, he's this hacktivist character. We're really going to lean into that. He's clashing with this authority figure, and but he's not acted as a confident activist character. He's opinionated, but he's not like snappy like that.
Mm.
Um, so and it's entirely possible that there were cut scenes that were like, oh yeah, well, the reason why his dialogue is like this is because of a conversation he had with K-9 that was then cut. But as of now, it's just like, okay, they tried to level him up as a character, and the actor wasn't ready for it, or the director wasn't, giving the right direction to match that, or something like that.
Mm. Yeah, like it would not surprise me if it was a matter of like, I mean, while this writer had done previous episodes, if it was like, well, he's going to be interacting with one of the primary villains effectively, so we might as well lean into this.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we also don't necessarily know the order that these stories were written in. So
True.
maybe this was technically the first one written. It just wasn't like written before the other ones this writer did. And they mainly just had the outline of, well, he's a hacktivist, so, you know, he hasn't really been all that anti-authority in his speech in a while, so maybe let's lean into that.
Right, right. But yeah, here he's like, from like his first or second line of dialogue, he's like, does this count as a question? And I'm like, that. But yeah, especially like his
Mm.
arguments on the alien planet with Thorn, it was just like, okay, this like your dialogue is confident and your delivery isn't.
Mm.
All right, on to favorite scenes. So Erin mentions two. She says, "Why am I talking to a robot dog?" Which is interesting because this is right after the scene of K-9 coming out. Like, here, let me spell things out to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
Here's a list of things that you think you know and things that you don't know, and so that's like Thorn trying to like recoup some of his self-esteem after being dressed down by K-9. And the other
Mm.
one Aaron mentions is, could you put your arms around each other and become one? And I'm not gonna lie, my first reaction to that scene is, oh God, are we going Jeff Goldblum here?
Mm. Um, that one, like, I mainly found really funny just because, like, for even stuff written in, well, I guess wasn't necessarily written in 2010, could have been written in 2009, but
Mm-hmm.
for something coming out in 2010 to have Starkey be like, come on, let's do it, whatever.
He's like,
Like,
it's not like we're going steady.
yeah, like the fact that it's not like, I would expect even from 2010, so I'll give them credit. I would expect something from 2010 to have neither of them want to do it in a sort
Mm-hmm.
of ew gay kind of bullshit.
Right.
Like, or just like, oh, no, I hate you, so I don't want to. But like, Starkey is just being a snarky bastard at this point, and it's just like, come on. Like, he knows how humiliating this is
Mm-hmm.
for Thorn, so he's leaning into it.
Yeah.
Uh,
So now we're on your favorite scene.
yep. Um, I think I'm gonna go with the librarian, and like, there's quite a few things I could go with. But I'm gonna go with the librarian basically telling Thorn to his face, like, if you mess with these people, you're dead. Like,
Which I doubt that that is actually canon because otherwise the show would have no more tension.
right.
I can't assume they brought back Thorn just for him to leave them alone.
Hmm. I mean,
Unless he gets
I
unless
think,
Lomax actually shows up in person next episode and
like,
gets rid of Thorn.
like, I'm going to assume it's gonna be a situation of like, Thorn is the big bad right now. but then like the guy above is gonna show up later to be like the villain. It might even be a
Hmm.
case of like Thorn's there now, but then we'll probably get the other guy back. Um, like that could still happen. Drake, that's it.
Drake, yeah. Which,
Um,
I mean, it's interesting in that I'm getting the impression, and this is partially because of spoilers that I've read and immediately stopped reading once I realized it was going into
mm,
spoiler territory. But I'm starting to think that Thorn is the only one who actually knows what Lomax looks like, other than just the silhouette that we've seen June talking to from time to time.
mm,
Um, they haven't said anything one way or another, but that's kind of
right.
the impression I'm starting to get.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure this is the first time that boss has ever actually been named as well.
I, the name's been mentioned a couple of times, and at least once we saw the
Mm.
conversation, like June and Lomax having a Skype call, which was when Drake got fired, demoted, transferred,
mm.
something. We don't know necessarily know what yet.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we still don't know much about them.
Mm.
So I guess we're on to my favorite scene, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna have to say I've already mentioned this scene, but I'm gonna have to go with the scene of K-9 coming in and being like, okay, let's make sure we're all on the same page, because it felt like it was written for the Doctor. It was like K-9 downloaded his Doctor Who protocol and was like, okay, here's how you establish dominance in a situation with an asshole. And he just completely nailed that scene, and I loved it.
mm.
All right, least favorite scene, and Aaron's written quite a bit here. Let's see. The opening scene with June and Thorne in the staircase. The audio is so tinny that she had to listen 5 times with her ear to the screen, and still didn't understand Thorne's final comment. Clearly, you wanted a touch of acid in reference. Oh, okay. So what Aaron's talking about there is that basically, they were talking in metaphor. Basically, Thorne was implying that uh June's constant comments or dial or her advocacy for certain outcomes were like erosion, like water dripping on stones, like forming a canyon sort of thing. And June was saying is like, well, I wouldn't, didn't expect it to be that quick, right? Water on stone is over hundreds of years. And that's when Thorne was saying something, basically like there must be a touch of acid to her water in terms of making things happen more quickly. Which it's really interesting because that's basically seems like he was saying that June was, a very, very persuasive, but in a way that made it sound bad. So that was really interesting, and I'm not entirely sure what they intended with that.
Mm.
Um, then she says the audio mixing for the guard is awful. He's too quiet to hear as Thorne reprimands him, so it sounds like Thorne is talking to himself. Okay, and then we're back in the underground tunnels again. Okay, so yeah, I would say that first one is the real main one she had
Mm.
things to say about. What's your least favorite scene?
Um. Oh god, I'm trying to remember now. Um. I think it's one of the, and like this might just be a detriment of like watching the DVD that I have. And it would probably hit weird on Tubi, even though Tubi probably has an ad break in the right spot, for all I know. But like, there's a specific cut from scene to scene, which kind of goes with my. It really feels like, in some cases, there's stuff missing, or maybe it's just like a really, really weird edit. But like it goes from like really dramatic, loud music and then just cuts to basically dead quiet for another scene between June and Thorn. And I'm like, what the fuck happened there? Like, I think it's like it cuts from like Starkey in the card on the dead planet, or like the professor and that like interacting with them or something. And then yeah, and like it cuts to June going to talk to Thorn. And it's just such a jarring edit because it's like so loud and then suddenly all that sound, rather than like just slowing, like rather than just gradually going down as we'd seen transition, it just feels like it kind of just stops dead. And then we cut
Okay.
as we cut to the next scene. So it's just a
Mm,
really jarring edit. Like, I assume it's a case of like, if I was watching this on TV when it aired, there was probably an ad break there. So it wouldn't have been as jarring because it would have been like, oh, the music's building up and then an ad break. And then we come back to the June Thorn scene. But like, without the ads, if there was supposed to be an ad break there, it's that edit just feels really weird.
gotcha. So I'm going to have to go with one that I think falls more as a continuity error, and that is and I'm not even sure if this is the first time this has happened, but it really stands out because last week we had the episode where where Griffin was like, I can't even poke my head out the window because my agoraphoria is so bad, even though I know that like Darius's life depends on it.
Hmm.
And then this episode, he's fully straight up walking his whole body outside of his front door
Yeah.
to see the librarian off. And maybe that's because of the romance subplot that was cut,
Yeah.
if there is a full subplot there. But all we know is, we have this person who would not poke his head out the window to save
Hmm.
his assistant's life because of his agoraphobia, is now relatively unaffected enough to fully walk outdoors in broad daylight.
Yeah.
Like, he can, the door stays open. It's easy to get back inside, but still, his whole ass body is out
Yeah.
outside of the door.
Yeah. Like, it makes me wonder in hindsight if that was more supposed to be him being like, I'm not sticking my head out the window in a storm, and just using his agoraphobia as a like an excuse not to.
I mean, honestly, from a meta perspective, I think it was, we really need to justify June being involved in this story.
Yeah.
Hey, let's have her stick her head out the window.
Hmm.
Um, because I think the portrayal in this episode is probably more accurate to the rest of the series. Like I said,
Hmm.
I think he's come to the door before.
Yeah, yeah. It's a matter
So,
of like, it's not that he won't go outside. I think it's more of like, if you wanted him to go further than beyond the doorstep, then
right,
that would
right.
be a bit much.
Yeah, so the whole poking his head out the window is the bad part, but it's
Hmm.
them being two episodes back to back from each other. It
Hmm.
really makes that specific scene like, what the hell? And I'm like,
Yeah.
and this isn't like, I'm not trying to promote like ignorant ideas. I know, I'm sure people with agoraphobia have good days and bad days.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are people with agoraphobia that can walk outside, onto their stoop or their porch and no farther.
Hmm.
I'm not questioning that at all.
Yeah.
It's just in the context of him specifically saying, how bad my agoraphobia is, even the thought of poking my head out the window,
Yeah. Like, and
it's not a good juxtaposition.
yeah. And like, you could even do like retroactively thinking about that. They could have just had it be that like he was just less play up his agoraphobia with that and more, God, I'm not sticking out my head out the window during a storm. Are you nuts? And her being like, oh, you bloody wimp. I'll do it. You know. rather than playing up his agoraphobia, just be like, I don't want to possibly get struck by lightning, and her being
Hmm.
like, oh, you bloody coward, I'll do it. um, but yeah, like, I mean, it's funny because I almost feel like when they brought it up, and this does make me wonder if, like, again, if what order these episodes were actually written in, because I could see them not necessarily having been written one after the other. So maybe they didn't catch that, but you would think you would catch that when you decide the order that they're airing in.
Hmm.
Because if the last episode had aired like way earlier, it wouldn't have been a problem. Or even like if it had aired like just like a few episodes earlier, it
Hmm.
would have made a little more sense. But yeah, it's I don't know. Yeah, it is kind of weird having one specifically emphasizing that, and then no, he's fine going out onto like the front step.
Right. All right, and Aaron, I think forgot to write final thoughts,
Hmm.
so we are on to your final thoughts.
Um, it's funny. This is one where I'm like, is this like the best episode of K-9 we've covered so far? Again, I haven't seen the first like 10 or 12 in so long that it's hard to really gauge. But I'd say this is the most entertaining one that I've seen in quite some time. Like, I really enjoyed this and I did not expect to. Like, it might just be a matter of like the bar was kind of set so low earlier on, and this show can have some very low lows that like anything that's like above average really stands out.
Right.
But yeah, just like this was very fun. Like I will admit when Starkey and that show up and they just it's very clear they're gonna fuck around. I'm like, what are you doing? There's very clearly cameras everywhere. This is way too easy. You're really not thinking about that. And then Starkey gets sucked into the thing, and I'm like, oh god damn it, what are we doing? And then, but then it won me back over. Like as it went further from that, it won me back. I will admit, I think it was even like at one point I was even just like, wait, is Georgie just not in this? And then she randomly shows up in the scene. I'm like, oh, there she
Yes,
is.
the Georgie Light episode of the season.
Yeah. Yeah, like I would definitely like I definitely feel like especially with how many episodic stories there are in this show so far, you can definitely like skip around after a certain point early on. I would definitely say this is one that if you're going to watch this show, this is one I wouldn't skip.
Oh, for sure. Anything else?
That's about it. I mean, oh well, I guess I will add. I do find like there wasn't really a decent place to bring it up. Um, because it got a laugh out of me, but like it was also kind of like, was that the word he meant to use? Because there's the bit where like Starkey is like quipping at Thorn any chance he gets, and he calls his outfit skanky, and I'm like, given the immediate thing he follows it up with is like, you look like you're a funeral director or something. I'm like, so did you mean skanky or daggy? Because daggy would fit that more. Skanky is like
and,
slutty.
and
So
that might even fit in with my comment of like he's written to be like snappy, but like
yeah.
his character, like it may even have been intentional. They'd be like,
Mm.
okay, he's playing big for Thorn, but he really
Mm.
doesn't know how to banter like this.
Yeah. Mm. I mean, it was kind
Yeah.
of funny to hear the word skanky in a kid show anyway, because I'm like, what?
Yeah, so it doesn't have a different meaning in Australia or anything. It's the same as it is everywhere else, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, in terms of some of the stuff mentioned, so I found it very interesting that they immediately Starkey starts drawing attention to himself at the beginning of the episode. It's like, I'm pretty sure you're supposed to be on the run from the department, who have also tried to assassinate you multiple times. And here you are, like, publicly drawing attention to yourself and making it super obvious that you're in the building. So, yeah, I was really interested in, what did he expect to happen there?
Yeah.
Um, on the other note, since we're talking about, the two kids that were actually in the episode, Darius kind of makes himself useful here.
Mm.
He steals the artifact, he brings it to the professor, he gives useful advice. He doesn't try to make money off of it. It's he's actually tolerable in this episode. Go figure. Um Otherwise, yeah, this is a pretty decent episode. It's a little rough around the edges at times, but it's the main core of it's pretty good. Most of the execution is pretty decent. Um, I did not have as many issues with the technicals as some may have. Um, and what stood out more to me was some of like the grains of sand in the writing and things like that. Was there something else I wanted to bring up? I think we've said all there is to say about the librarian, about Thorn. Yeah, so I think that's about it for my final thoughts. And we move on to ratings. So again, we do not have a rating from Aaron yet.
Mm.
Uh, what is your rating?
You know what? I enjoyed this so much, and I'm honestly kind of surprised at myself. But whether or not it technically earned it, I don't see necessarily anything else doing this. And if something else earns it, I'll probably change it. But I'm giving this a 5.
5. Oh wow, you're like, oh wow, I think I like this so much. I was like, oh, another 4.5. Okay, you're going
Like
out on the limb for a 5.0.
yeah. Like I'll put it this way: if we get anything that I enjoy more than this will probably go down slightly. But for now, it's a 5.
Okay. So yeah, so I'm looking at the last two episodes. I gave a 4.0 and a 4.5, not in that order. And I'm left wondering where I want to put this. And I would probably say it's better than the Cambridge Spy. And just by virtue of Thorn being a much more interesting, at least to listen to him talk, character compared to Drake.
Mm.
So yeah, I guess I'm going to give this a 4.5. So the rating right now is a 4.75 with the two ratings. Unless Aaron is very much more optimistic than I would
Mm.
anticipate, I expect that 4.75 to drop at
Oh,
least
it
to
will.
like a 4.6 next time.
Yeah.
But for now, let's see where that places it.
Very high.
So out of 483 things reviewed, it is number 32 or tied for 28. It is on par with Sarah Jane Adventures, The Mark of the Berserker, uh, and Torchwood to the Last Man, which is not the best episode of either of those shows. This is currently our highest rated episode of K-9. So it is not as good as, and this we're starting all the way at the 5.0s because we're towards the top. It's not as good as Sarah Jane Adventures, The Lost Boy, Torchwood Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. And that's it for spin-offs, actually. And it is better than Whatever Happened to Sarah Jane, Sarah Jane, The Empty Planet. And then, okay, yeah, and 4.5. So we got Goodbye, Sarah Jane Smith, and Test of Nervous Big Finish. And then we don't even get a Torchwood episode again until Ghost Machine at 4.42.
Did you mention Countryside?
Did I not see it? Where is it?
It's
Oh,
just on the Kindle.
so okay, yeah, I did not see it for whatever reason. It's so this is better than Countryside slightly. All right, and that is all we have to say about the Lost Library of Ukko. Do you remember how it was pronounced? Like, I don't even remember hearing it
I
said.
kind of flip flop.
Like, I don't even remember hearing them say it once.
Like, I think sometimes it said Ukko, sometimes it said Ukko, so I just kind of went with whatever I went with.
Let us know in the comments what you thought of this week's episode if you've watched it. Don't forget to like the video if you've listened this far. And follow us on, and subscribe on YouTube to get our exports each week. Or follow us on Twitch to get notified when we stream. Next time, we wrap up our 20th season with our first stories tier list. That's the first stories of each Doctor. We will see you then.